Our purpose today is to turn on the fountain, and that signifies the rebirth of Marshall University football program after the tragic accident November 14th, 1970, which we recognize every year on that date in the fall. But today's a day of celebration. A day is to look back and recognize those who continued the task of continuing the football program at Marshall University. And we have many of our members of our young Thundering Herd here today. Coach Jack Lingle couldn't be with us. He's usually here at this event every year. His wife had some surgery, nothing major, and Jack called me a couple days and he couldn't be here. So Coach Lingle's here with us in spirit. My dear friends I haven't seen and have come in for this event are in awe of what they see on this campus because they have not been here for a while. And this gentleman's fingerprints are on everything. To welcome us here this morning for this ceremony, I'd like to introduce the president of Marshall University, Dr. Stephen J. Kopp. Dr. Kopp.
Thank you, Mike. What a glorious morning. I have the honor of welcoming you all, and I certainly thank you all for joining us today. Mike has discussed the significance of this event and the celebration and what we're celebrating. I'd like to add to that it's important for everybody who's here today to take a moment and reflect on the power of sheer determination and will and what it can do to make things happen and to change the future for the better when a group of people take on a challenge, the young Thundering Herd, the coaches, and so on, that everyone tells you is an impossible thing to do. Why bother? It's so much easier to quit, to fold up in a little ball and stop trying. In my opinion, one of the most remarkable traits of this university and its people are that when they come together and by sheer will and determination pursue a cause, great things happen because of the commitment, the drive, the hard work of making those goals realities. In 8 years that I've been here, I cannot think of a time that I have not heard repeatedly from all kinds of people telling us, you shouldn't try doing this because it's so difficult and I don't think you can succeed. Those of us who have been committed to this university deeply and ardently have ignored the naysayers, have ignored the detractors, and all the folks who keep telling us what we can't accomplish. Set your sights lower. Don't try so hard. You're working too hard. Today is a celebration of all the people here assembled on the stage and elsewhere who would not accept someone else's limitations for what we are becoming and what we can become. Because the folks of We Are Marshall are not wired that way. We take on the impossible and make it possible. We do all the things that everyone else says you can't do. We see it on the playing surfaces in competition. We see it in the classrooms with our students. We see it in the successes of our faculty and everything that happens on this campus because of the sheer will and determination and the absolute expectation of success that drives what we do here. You are all part of that community. You're a vital part of that community. And I thank you for joining us today to celebrate life and the pursuit of goals that are beyond our immediate grasp. That's what we're here to do, and we're not going to let you down. Thank you.
Please give a warm welcome for Dr. Bob Sawrey.
I'm not sure he's talking about me. Forgive me for reading this. You want me to read it, not because it's so brilliant, but because when I don't read, I ramble, and I typically talk to students in 75-minute chunks, and none of us are up for that today. So this is going to keep me on task. I am Bob Sawrey, and I am completing my 33rd year in the history department at Marshall University. I am pleased that John Sutherland and Mike asked me to speak briefly to you today about a faculty member's perspective on Marshall athletics. I do have a perspective, and on this day when we remember our past and also are reminded by the arrival of spring to look forward to rebirth, growth, and a future full of realized hopes and dreams and expectations, I am happy to share that perspective with you. I would like to establish up front something that I see as central to my comments today, and Mike alluded to that briefly. Unlike most of you here today, I am not a son of Marshall. But over the years, for this kid from South Dakota, Marshall has come home. And I'm thrilled today to consider myself an adopted son of Marshall. When I arrived here 10 years ago, when I arrived here 10 years after the momentous events of November 1970, I had no meaningful appreciation of Marshall's unique past. I had heard of Hal Greer, but not Cam Henderson, not Gunnar Gadsky, not the D'Antoni brothers. Shoot, I didn't even know who Ernie Salvatore was. I was pretty ignorant. In fact, and please forgive me for my seeming insensitivity, I was a bit stunned that every November folks around here seemed to want to remember the plane crash. I just did not get it. And I went obliviously about my life, trying to be a good prof, trying to teach decent classes, serve as faculty advisor to the most active, most important, and orneriest student organization in Marshall's history, get tenure, that's important, and deal with a growing family. Then in 1991, President Wade Gilley asked me to chair a committee that he had created. He called it the President's Athletic Advisory Committee, and I suppose he picked me for the task because I was then serving as president of the Marshall University Faculty Senate. I readily accepted, and my life was changed forever. The education of Bob Sawrey had begun. A couple years later, the pace of that education quickened when Dr. Gilley appointed me Marshall's NCAA faculty athletics representative. Please pardon one brief digression here. As FAR, I would follow Dr. Dorothy Hicks. Some folks would have us believe that various coaches and athletes at Marshall have earned legendary status, and probably some have. None of them have given more of their time, their energy, their talent, and money than Dot. For decades, she has loved, served, and contributed in many ways to Marshall, and still does. She is truly a legend and a symbol of commitment to all of us who care about this institution. In my years as FAR, I was fortunate to interact with 3 groups who taught me about this school, its history, and its significance. The first was the Big Green Executive Board, of which I became, as FAR, an ex officio member. For the first time in my career here, I met, spoke, and learned from many people who had long associations with Marshall as graduates, friends, and boosters. I saw firsthand their commitment and generosity, and because nearly all of them had been here in November 1970, I began to learn what that dreadful plane crash had meant to this community, this school, and everyone involved with Marshall. I was absorbing that in a way that is hard to put into words, Marshall was a genuinely unique and special place. In short, I began to get it. In 1996, not long after being hired as football coach, Bobby Pruitt, working with Ralph May, created the letter winners organization that we now call the M Club. They asked me as faculty rep to be the faculty liaison to that group. In that role, I really got immersed in the world of Marshall athletics from the perspective of past athletes who joined the M Club. I was fortunate to get to meet with them, become friends with them, listen to their old stories about competing, some of which they might even have remembered accurately. Many of them had been here in the late 60s and early 70s, and movingly recalled the pain and devastation this community endured in 1970. Some lost friends, teammates, or family members. For helping me understand, I will always be grateful to them. Finally, I had got it. In listening to them, I also clearly heard what Marshall meant to them. Many spoke passionately about the reality that for them, Marshall was the only route from wherever they had come to a better life. With near reverence, they recalled classes that they had taken years earlier from outstanding faculty like Sam Clagg in geography, or Charlie Moffat in history, or Simon Perry in political science. They did not hesitate to acknowledge that without Marshall, their lives would have been very different and almost certainly less pleasant. Those were wow moments for me. I knew that Marshall was important for young people of this region, but I had never heard 50 and 60 and 70-year-olds verbalize just how much it had meant to them every day of their lives. The message was stunningly clear. Marshall University is not just another university. It really matters. Those 2 groups helped me comprehend Marshall's past, but the third group was focused on Marshall's present and future. In my first decade here, I had occasionally had a few student athletes in my classes, but beginning with my years as FAR and since, I have had hundreds and hundreds of student athletes in classes. I hope and believe that I have never shortchanged any of my students, but working with student athletes has been a life-transforming experience for me. I love teaching whoever walks in the room, but having large numbers of student athletes in class was a whole new deal. Usually, guys, but not always, their presence created a distinct and different tone in the classroom, and a better one. And much more importantly, I got to know dozens and dozens of them, not just as students or as athletes, but as people. truly special people, and that was special to me. But the real fun for me had barely begun. When Wade Gilly appointed me FAR, he said that my most important assignment was to concern myself with what he called the welfare of the student athlete. I wasn't even sure what that meant. But we decided it meant that outside of the competitive arena, which was appropriately the responsibility of the coaches, I could stick my nose into every other aspect of the student athlete's life at Marshall. I have had a great time as a professor and take teaching mighty seriously, but I enjoy problem solving more than I do teaching. And now I was not just allowed to solve problems, not just encouraged to solve problems, I was mandated to solve problems. I would not fail. I was like a compulsive shopper at the mall with a fistful of daddy's credit cards. Working with wonderful folks from all areas of the campus, we addressed an enormous variety of issues, and I think we made some important contributions and improvements in numerous areas. Whatever contributions I might have had, something very important was happening to me, and that was I got more in return than I gave. For the first time in my academic career, I felt like I was part of something truly significant. I had become an educator to change people's lives for the better, and now I had a chance to do that every day. I relished those opportunities. Quite simply, I had become part of a family, the Marshall family, our family. I was energized, and like all of us do every spring, I experienced a rebirth of sorts, a revitalization. It was thrilling and empowering, and it all revolved around relationships with people that I cared about and still care about. That all started nearly 20 years ago, but I have been blessed to have been allowed to continue to work with Marshall Athletics and Marshall student athletes, and have continued to be, like all of you, a part of the Marshall family. One of the most enjoyable aspects of these years has been that several coaches have asked me to be involved in their recruiting efforts. As a result, I have met hundreds and hundreds of high school students, their parents, their families, and their coaches, and have been able to develop relationships with these student athletes when they were as young as 17 years old. When they came to Marshall, and you need to understand, all of you, that when the coaches get the student athlete here for a visit, we get them because we know what the hell we're selling, and it's a good product. So, when they come to Marshall, the relationships blossomed as they took classes from me, and we talked about everything important to them, including life after Marshall. I have had the opportunity to help them see possibilities that they might never have imagined before coming to Marshall. As educators, our ultimate goal should always be to help young people create dreams and then prepare them to make those dreams realities. I have been privileged to do that and watch these young members of the Marshall family mature into happy, competent, contributing adults. For me, life does not get any better than that. Every spring reminds all of us where we have been as a family and what others have given to allow us to be in this privileged position. We have an obligation to build on that which we have inherited and to pass it on in better shape than we received it. And with vision and commitment, we will do exactly that. At crucial points in Marshall's athletic events, the fans often stand and raise their voices to proclaim, "We are Marshall." I suspect to the opposition it can be more than a bit intimidating, but it is far more than a cheer. It is a declaration about our unique and honored past and about our determination to overcome adversity. It is a statement about who we are, about what we stand for, and most of all, about the love and respect we in the Marshall family have for each other. I thank you for letting me be part of that family.
But I have never met a more wonderful, genuine, caring person and a hell of a football player and a guy who gave everything he had on that football field and for this university and has since the day he has left. And I'm proud to call him my dear friend, Bill Slick Forbes. Bill.
And by the way, that was the fastest 40 I ever ran. I wish a pro scout could have been on me that day. The evening of November 14th, 1970, was a night that changed the lives of many people, including myself and many of you gathered here today. It was one of those tragic events in which you remember where you were and what you were doing when you received that news. I was at a teen dance when I learned that Marshall's football team, along with their coaching staff and many boosters, had died tragically in a plane crash. And I was stunned. But you know, the magnitude of that event didn't really hit me until about 3 years later in the Thundering Herd locker room. It was a home game. I believe it was our first. And I was a freshman, and I was scheduled to play on special teams. And nevertheless, I was excited, and I was pumped up because it was going to be my first appearance in a Marshall game uniform. But before we left the field, one of the coaches came to me and he said, "There's some folks here who have come that want to meet you." And a well-dressed, middle-aged couple walked into our crowded dressing room and they extended their hands to me and they said, "You're wearing our son's jersey number. We wanted to meet you." And so I embraced them and I said, "I'm proud to be wearing your son's number, and I'll do my very best to properly represent him." Later, I found out that their son was Joe Hood, who was the Herd's talented starting running back. And these folks had traveled all the way from Alabama to see the Herd play again, which I'm sure was both emotionally and physically exhausting for them. And after the game, as I started thinking about what had happened, I realized that meeting me was important enough to them to seek me out in that crowded dressing room. And I realized that in a sense, I was representing their son. I'd taken his place to carry on his unfinished work. And there was a sense in which I was taking the place of someone who died doing what I was brought in to do at Marshall University. Needless to say, the number 33 has been very important to me ever since. Bob kind of mentioned that people outside of our program cannot understand our passion for Marshall football. They can understand the importance to us of remembering those who we lost so many years ago. What they don't understand is that no other football team in NCAA history has had it to start completely over again. No other team has had parents come into their dressing room to find the players who'd be wearing their son's jersey number. No other team can say that we were the reason why the NCAA allowed freshmen to start in varsity sports. No other team has ever taken the field with the odds so overwhelmingly stacked against them as that young 1971 Thundering Herd team did. No other team has come as far as we have. From the losingest program in the NCAA in the 1970s to the winningest program in the NCAA in the 1990s. Including 2 undefeated seasons, 6 conference titles, winning 2 national championships, from going from being the very worst in the country to being the very best. That's why we will never forget. No other team has come from ashes to glory as Marshall has, and we are proud that we are Marshall. Who we are is all about where we have come from. We're not just the school that lost their team in a plane crash. We're the school that made the decision to restart a program that had been decimated. We're the school who competed when the odds were stacked against us. We're the school that wouldn't give up, the school that wouldn't quit. As Coach Jack Lengel said in the movie, We Are Marshall, it wasn't so much about winning as it was keeping the program alive, suiting up, taking the field, and continuing what had been started. It was about not giving up. Being back on the field was called a triumph of the human spirit. I want to talk about 4 R's today. And the first R is for remember. We should always remember and honor those who lost their lives in the service of our university on that day. I didn't have the privilege of knowing any of them, but I know that there were expectations of future greatness for them. So today, we remember those who lost their lives that day. The second R is for respect. We should respect the fearlessness and optimism of a young Coach Jack Lengel, who took on such a difficult task knowing that fans have short memories and that they would expect a winner far before we could ever produce one. He was certainly the right man for that job. We should respect the perseverance of 2 young assistant coaches, Coach Red Dawson and Coach Mickey Jackson. Who poured their hearts and souls back into a program that had just ripped their hearts and souls out. We should respect that initial group of young men who took the field in 1971 to put a football team back on the field for Marshall University. That initial team of 1971, the Young Thundering Herd, deserves our respect for taking the field against overwhelming odds, for taking the physical punishment that freshmen get when they play against upperclassmen, and for pulling off 2 miracle wins in the home opener against Xavier and homecoming against Bowling Green. But the next 3 years of recruits, 71, 72, and 73, we felt like we were members of the Young Thundering Herd too. Coach Lengel kept on talking about that day when we would have a full class structure. Freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, just like every other team. And we had been attracted to Marshall by coaches telling us that we might be able to start playing as freshmen. That was enticing and exciting. But you want to know what the real appeal was for us to come here? The emotional draw, the pull, that which makes your heart beat a little faster. We wanted to be a part of rebuilding that which had been destroyed. We wanted to be a part of that. We came here as idealistic, confident freshmen thinking that we were going to help turn this program around. Didn't we, guys? And we didn't accomplish that. But I like to think that we, along with many others, helped put a brick in the wall of the foundation that would be Marshall University's football rebirth. You know, I know that sports brings people together probably unlike any other activity, and that athletes from all schools make friends that last a lifetime. But there's something special here, guys. There's something special here. Once you become a part of the program here, the tradition, the passion, you're not the same. You have a respect for all those who've come before you, who have contributed to where we are today. And guys, we're proud of where we are today. If you would have been able to look within my face mask as I ran onto the field in 1973, when those guys that restarted our program in 1971 were seniors, you would have seen that I was bawling my eyes out because I had a respect for those guys that restarted our program, not just for what they endured, but for what they accomplished. And we should always remember and respect those faithful fans who came to Fairfield to try to fill our stadium, despite the fact that many times there wasn't much to cheer about. But they came anyway. My twin brother Dave and I were talking on the phone, and he said, you know what? Isn't it remarkable that I can never remember the fans booing us? And we were the losingest program in the NCAA. That's pretty remarkable. And I've had to remind myself on occasion when I think the Herd should have won a game that we lost and I want to complain, I've had to remind myself, you know, I want to be the kind of fan who came to watch the teams that I was on play when we were the worst program in the country and people came faithfully and supported us, win, lose, or draw. The kind of fan that says, you know what, we may not have the best team in college football today, but I'll tell you this, we're the only team in the country that can say, we are Marshall, and we're proud of that. The kind of fan that says, I love my team, and they don't have to be the very best for me to love them the most. And the third R is for return. We want to return, gentlemen, to national prominence. Coach, I may have just lied when I said that I love my team the most, whether they're the best or not. I want us to win Conference USA this year. I want us to go to a major bowl and win it. I want us to end up ranked in the top 15 or even the top 10 in the country. And then, fellas, I do promise I'll love all of you. And I think that's fair, Coach, given all the talent you have coming back this year, said the ex-motivational speaker to the prominent head coach who has lots of connections. Herd fans, I want to tell you this. This is going to be a great year for Thundering Herd football. I like to close with a call to action. I call it putting work boots on your message. In other words, yes, we need to remember those who were lost to our university that day. And yes, we should respect all those who put a brick back in the foundation of Marshall football. And I know that everyone here today wants us to return to national prominence. But I want to ask you, what's your part in all of this? How are you contributing? And that brings me to the fourth R of my message, reciprocate or give back. Marshall has given to you, so you need to give back to Marshall. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, what can I do? I'm only one person. Everett Hale said, I'm only one person, but I am one. What I can do, I should do, but by the grace of God, what I should do, I will do. You figure out what it is that you can do for our university, and then do it. Make it one of your goals that I'm going to help put in my contribution to what is the greatest comeback in all of sports history. What's my part in that? And you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's getting a little serious about football, isn't it, Brother Bill? It's just a game. Well, it is just a game, but it's a great game. I think it's the greatest game. And it's a scale version of the game of life. And the scriptures say that if you're faithful in the little things, you'll be faithful in the big things. I like to think that when Joe Hood's parents traveled all the way from Alabama to meet the young man who'd be wearing their son's number, I'd like to think that they weren't disappointed, even though they saw a skinny, 190-pound, knock-kneed boy from New Martinsville, West Virginia, who was only on the kickoff team. That's my hope. And I want to say to Devon Smith, who now wears number 33, wear that number in such a way that it brings honor not only to you, but to Joe Hood and to all those who followed after him to carry on his unfinished work. Gentlemen, I want you to listen to this, because that's what playing football at Marshall is all about. Perhaps the biggest life lesson that we can learn from November 14th, 1970, is that you don't know what your life is going to be like tomorrow. As the scriptures say, you're just like a vapor that appears for a moment and then vanishes away. Therefore, make the most of the time and the talents that the Lord has given you. I want to close with this thought for everyone gathered here. Live your life with this one overriding goal. Live your life in such a way that you'll receive the reward promised in the Scriptures. The Scriptures say, whatever you do, even if you're just on the kickoff team, do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men. For it's from the Lord that you will receive your inheritance. Live your life with this one overriding goal, that one day you will stand before your Master and hear him say, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Master. If you live your life with that one overriding goal, everything else in your life will fall into place. I want to thank everyone for attending today. Go Herd.
These are the gentlemen, I wasn't going to say young men, but gosh, you guys look like you're getting old, that made the decision to come and help start this football program. On behalf of Marshall University and the athletics program, we would like to thank you for coming today.